Good morning, everyone. So happy to have you all here and seeing mummies join already. We're very excited to have Dani and Léna here today. And while this month's coffee mornings is all about grief and loss, we're introducing a lot of modalities that can be super helpful in many other life circumstances, including, difficult, challenging pregnancies, difficult fertility journeys, birth trauma, fear of birth, so many different applications for these modalities. So today specifically, we're going to talk about Reiki and we're going to talk about body talk. We are going to set up the call so that Léna will be speaking first about her modalities, and then we'll hear from Dani. And please introduce the other modalities that you are offering as well, because you do so much more than just Reiki and body talk, right? So we'll start with Léna, and Léna, please introduce yourself and then go into what you've prepared for us today.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Well, thank you very much for inviting me and also for organizing all those calls. I'm really happy and glad to be here today. Well, first, because I love talking about body talk and introducing people to that modality. It's just like, I think it's an amazing way to take care of ourselves and our health. But also, mostly today, I'm really glad to have a chance to discuss that topic. I mean, pregnancy and infant loss is unfortunately so common and yet so under-discussed. And as you say in some of your introduction, like we can do so much better on this. And I think talking about it and having those resources that we can share is really part of that. So so my name is Léna. I'm a body talk practitioner. I will tell you a little bit more about what is body talk, but in a nutshell, it's an energy therapy that helps reconnect with the natural capacity of our body and our mind to find its balance and heal. I'm also a mother of three. I have three small children. The last two were born in Singapore, where I've been living for 7 years now. And it's also the place where I changed career, because initially I studied economics and policies, so nothing to do with that. I worked in public health, and then life brought me to retrain completely. And it's been 4 years now that I have a practice here. So I work mostly with body talk, but also some other holistic approaches that I learned along the way. I started with maternity reflexology, thinking that it was missing a little bit in Singapore, where traditionally we don't really like to give reflexology or foot massage to pregnant women. And I found it was so amazing for my first pregnancy. I do craniosacral therapy and Reiki a little bit also, that Daniel will cover in depth. So before, I'm here to tell you more about body talk and how it can support anybody during a time of loss. And also, as you were saying, I work a lot, anything around pregnancy and maternity, which is a little bit like my heart's topic and what I love working on. Because a little bit, I mean, even more than loss is under discussed, I feel like there is so much more that we could do also as a society to better support women through their whole maternity journey. So today I just wanted to start with sharing a few insights and thoughts that came to me working with women during those years, and then I will tell you a little bit more about body talk and how it can help. So in my practice, I work with everyone. I have men, women, children, but as I was saying, naturally, because maternity is just like such an important topic for me, and I feel there is a lot we can do. I have a lot of people coming around their pregnancy, or I work a lot with babies and small children. And so seeing many women every week, the topic of pregnancy and infant loss came up a lot, I would say, naturally. It comes up because women are coming just for this. They're coming because they are going through that process of loss and they're looking for support. It's coming because women are coming sometimes years later, a little bit later. They feel the need to get some help to process the experience, for example, because they want to get pregnant again. But what I find interesting to share is that this topic is coming often when women are coming for things that are completely unrelated with this. So it could be still maternity related, like as I was saying, trying to conceive, or it could be because they have some issues that are connected with, let's say, their uterus, or they have period pain or endometriosis, ovarian cyst, like anything a little bit connected. but also for things that seems to have nothing to do with it, like stress and sleep, or thyroid, or eczema, migraine. Like it can be really also about dealing with emotions of anger or sadness that have nothing to do with that loss. So women come for various reasons to see me, and yet quite often we end up working on that topic. So when I say we end up working on the topic of loss, it's I need to quickly explain already just a concept of body talk, which is the concept of priority. So basically with body talk, we let the body, the mind, the subconscious choose what it wants to work on, what it's ready to change, to release, to put more attention on, to help us feel our best, to help us heal better, to help us solve like the issue we're coming for. So when I say like we end up working on that, it's really that people come for various reasons, and yet when the body is asked like, what are you ready to work on, what do you want to change, then if the person went through the loss of a baby or a miscarriage, pretty often it will come up in the session. And how I see it, how I interpret it is, well, it's first a good reminder on how common it is. And I think Sylvia shared very interesting statistics last week on her talk that I really recommend you to watch if you haven't yet. But it's also just a reminder of how it's such a profound experience that wants to be processed and wants to have some space to be talked about, to exist, to be released, and all those emotions around it. And for me, part of the story, and that's my interpretation, but it's that we don't give much space and visibility to it. And there is often a real sense of loneliness that comes with it for the parents. And I think it just adds that on that painful experience, just adding to the pain and grief already, that in a way that might be a little bit unnecessary. So that's one more reason why I think it's so important to have those talk. And it's key to encourage every woman to actually try to find the right space to release it. I know maybe some people who will be listening to that are going through loss, or they did. Maybe you haven't, but it's still such a great resource to keep, as you were saying, and maybe to share with friends, because unfortunately it happens to a lot of us, right? The other thing I found interesting just sharing today was how I said, it's coming up quite often in my sessions. And sometimes when we touch the subject, some women will definitely identify that as a massive trauma or a big experience, something really painful, but it's not always the case. And I'm going to share a little bit about me on that, because this is what happened to me. When I got introduced to body talk, it was my osteopath who referred me to a body talk practitioner, because I was pregnant with my second child, preparing for a natural birth after a C-section, and I broke my ankle being 8 months pregnant, which felt like awful. Maybe you remember, Johanna, I think I've met you at that time. So I really just wanted to get some help to heal that fracture as soon as possible, because that would make a difference if I could actually stand on my 2 feet to give birth and then carry my baby. So this osteopath recommended that lady and said, oh, when my clients don't really heal the way they should, I send them there and then they get better. And so I went to see her, and it helped me a lot heal, but also it helped me like feel much better. And then we started touching topics like the trauma from my first birth, which has been really hard. And then, we started working on other issues that were like migraines and sinus issues at that time. And that seems long, but it was just like a few sessions, like I've seen her just a few times. And going there, very far of my mind was to think about the 2 miscarriages that I had 4 years ago before my first child. And I didn't really think of it as a really traumatic event. And especially hearing about all those really brave women who shared about their experience and often had like massive, difficult loss. For me, 4 years later, I wouldn't think of it as like, oh, it was not really traumatic. I had like the sort of best experience of loss you could have, because it was early miscarriage. It resolved naturally. I was able to get pregnant quickly after. Still, when I went into that body talk session and, we were asking my body, what do you want to do to feel better overall and heal better, even that foot, that came up. And I found that was really important, and I wanted to share it because it's a reminder that loss can take a lot of difference, can be very different. And I mean, we think about the big losses first, like the late miscarriages, infant loss, and this is such a strong topic. But it's actually, I also see a lot of women who come for early miscarriages, who come because sometimes it was not even a baby that was in their flesh. It was, for example, IVF that were not successful, and the baby was sort of like imagined. So somehow it was there, and there is a real loss for that baby, even if it was never like carried physically in the body. It's also about people who decide to terminate a pregnancy, even if it's a choice. Any kind of loss is important. I think you touched about that last time too, and I just wanted to reiterate that not only is every experience of loss valid, but every experience may also need to find that space to talk about it, to release it in any way that works for the person. It's just such a profound experience. So now I wanted to tell you a little bit about Body Talk a little bit more, and how it can help navigate pregnancy and also loss, because that's the main focus today. But I'm just focusing a little bit more about grief and loss, but really it can apply to anything. And I mean, for me, because of my experience, I also specifically love working around anything, whether it's lived at a trauma or just a difficult experience related to pregnancy and previous birth. So in a nutshell, I was telling you, Body Talk is that energy-based therapy. And the idea is to get us back into a state where we can restore balance, where we can reconnect with our innate, our natural ability to heal. So we try to remove, I mean, we look for and remove the blockages in the energies that are created by stressors. So that could be the stress of like having so much to deal with in our life, but it could be also environmental stressors like pollution. It can be emotions that we're living at the moment, or past emotions. It can be past trauma or just difficult experiences. It can be past disease, surgeries. It's a little bit like, if we can look at anything that really prevents the body, the mind, the spirit to work together and come together to help us be in our best capacity, like our best self, and to heal also any issue that we might have. So now, how do we restore that balance and identify those blockages and those stressors? So we work with that priority concept that I was mentioning before. Like, we just really let the body, the mind, the subconscious choose what is the priority. What do we need? Where do we need more attention in our body? Where do we need a shift, a change? Where do we need to reconnect things? And in which order? In a way, we let the body decide what it wants to do and what it's also ready to work on. Because sometimes we're not ready to go and work on, you know, some of our topics or past story. We need to just first process different things, and maybe this doesn't become a problem anymore, solves itself. So basically, we let the body talk, and we tell us, it can tell us what it needs, and we do that through muscle checking. And sometimes I like to explain to kids, like, they go to school and learn a different language, like Chinese. Well, I went to a school to learn how to speak the body language, and it's just that nice way to have access to a different part of ourselves that is not our mind, our conscious mind, our rational side, to see what we can change and shift for our health. And so we let the body choose what it wants to do, saying, and so it can choose from like a big toolbox, which is different for each practitioner, because you can add whatever you know, but basically it's a lot of concept from Chinese medicine. So we could, for example, work with the 5 elements balance or with the meridians, but we can also work with the chakras energy. We incorporate elements just from medicine, Western medicine, and knowledge about the body and the physiology. We can use tools inspired from EFT, like tapping or emotional release. We can work more on the tissue stress with craniosacral therapy. It's really whatever, I mean, there is the big toolbox of Body Talk, and then whatever the practitioner knows and wants to add, we just let the body decide what's the best for the person, which means that it's different every time. And we really have a chance to remove the blockages based on what the body needs. Something that almost always comes is that we're really between the body and the mind. Is what is going on in our body is also a reflection of what's going on in our mind, in our emotion, what's in our history. And so we really have that chance to bridge those two things. And for me, this is why it's such an important and interesting piece of our health puzzle. It's because it's bridging those two elements. Practically, when people come to see me, like we'll have a little chat, then they will lay down, and then I'll use that's muscle checking to decide, and see what the body wants to do. I'll talk about it a little bit and explain, and then we help the body transform, release, just refocus its attention wherever it needs to, with light touch, with breathing and tapping. So overall, it's always a very relaxing experience, and this is one of the reasons I love it for during pregnancy and with babies, is that it's very safe and gentle, but yet at the same time it's really powerful because we go right where we need it. And actually, I usually don't see people so many times when they come for an issue. It's just a way to open that space to the body, the mind, like a little window, and then let it do what it's ready to do, and then we can just sort of move on and continue. So people often ask me, what is body talk for? And it's always a bit of a difficult question because it can work for almost everything. So I use it sometimes a little bit like first aid. On my kids, I use it for everything. Like they have a stomach bug, they have a fever, they don't want to go to school, like I will use it. I have people who come who don't have issues at all, but they just want to improve something, like prepare a marathon or prepare a birth, which is a bit similar, right? Mm-hmm. It can be, but I mean, so we can use it for everything. But for me, where I find it the most useful is when we don't find a good solution elsewhere, either because medically, like we identified the problem, but we don't really have a response. It can be because the person, for example, is feeling pain or discomfort, but there is no medical issues that have been identified, or we just don't know what it's causing it, or it can be a number of things like stress and sleep. You can do changes, but quite often we don't really know what's behind it. And the other reason I love it also for pregnancy is that I find it really useful when we feel we need to work on something that involves both our body and our mind and our emotions. And I think this is why, especially in the context of pregnancy and infant loss, it can be so helpful, because I mean, loss is a massive emotional event, but there is also a body component. We lived it in our flesh, and quite often we also have to recover physically. So body talk is one of the way to actually help both, like help us navigate the emotion and welcome them, and also recover and feel it in our body. Now, if I share a little bit more about why I think it can be a really interesting resource to consider during the time of loss, I would say first, because it's very gentle, and as you say, it's personalized. We let the body, the mind, the subconscious decide. So it's going to meet you where you are at that moment in your journey. It's just going to help you navigate it in your own way, because you don't have to feel like other people are feeling. You don't have to grieve like other people are grieving. It's just with that priority concept, we can just trust that the body and the subconscious is going to find the best way for us and help us navigate that time. Also in a moment where often we just don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. I also think it's just a time to quiet down, to take a breath, to step out of the storm a little bit, and land back into our body. Because in that overwhelming experience, it's quite easy to just lose a little bit ourselves and just be in a space where we can't connect with what matters for us, and we feel a little bit lost. We work a lot on the nervous system usually, or getting out of a state of shock, for example, that can last for a really long time. And I think this is great because it's a time where we can really need a sense of relaxation or relative peace or calm, like a little sheltered place. But also by helping us get back a little bit to feeling ourselves, I feel it helps us get a clear head. And this is such an important thing when we have to take decisions. And I think it's the case for a lot of women. There is a lot of decisions to take. and it feels like so overwhelming. And I've heard many women who are like, I wish I knew I had other option, or I wish I would have just like taken the time to think about that, to do research, to talk about people and not just be rushed, which unfortunately is what seems to happen a lot in hospitals too. So for me, it's also a chance to just taking a breath, going back to ourselves, and help us in a way be more centered to take the right decision for us, which can look different for every person. Some people also appreciate that you don't have to talk, even it's called body talk. It's like really your body is talking. So, and still we will work on the emotions. It can be a really great complement to therapy, to support group, or for people who don't feel like doing that at the moment, it can be a standalone too that helps process it without having to talk. And for me, it's just like it's a safe space. It's a time to just sit with the emotion, to just be and feel, and just take that little break. And it's also helpful down the line when we can find support to grieve in a safe place, to welcome and release our emotion. And I mean, we talk about grief, but it's also grief and sadness. It's also anger. It's also guilt. I think, Dani, you're going to touch that a lot, guilt and shame. So I'm not going to talk much about that, but those are emotions that come up so often and can take like such a heavy weight on a woman through those experiences. And yeah, I think you will tell a little bit more about that. So for me, it's just like that chance to have a gentle and calm time, while a powerful way to just navigate that experience. And I told you a little bit now more about how it helps us, you know, during the time of loss, or when it's a recent event. But it's not only the way. I told you before about how it came up for me and for other women years after. It's like the body identified revisiting that experience and that emotions as a priority. And so for me, I see it as a way, as saying to just get support and navigate that grief process and be accompanied, but also a gift for our future self. And what I mean by that is that I see how that's the body talk way of seeing health, but the body tends to keep those emotions that can't be processed. And it would sort of store the stress or the trauma in our body, in our tissues, usually in a place that makes sense, like, for example, the uterus, or someplace related to that when we talk about pregnancy loss. And so it can create some blockages in energy in the area, some stress in the area that later on can lead to imbalances or even physical issues. Because we think about emotions like, oh, emotions are something in the head we feel, but emotions are really also molecules. They are something that are in our body. And we see it, for example, I don't know, if we're terrified about something, like our heartbeat changes, our hands get all sweaty. And actually, there is that sense that an emotion is also a physical experience that you can just intuit like this. So I'm never going to say that unprocessed emotion means you will get sick. It would be totally wrong. But the other way around is something I see very often. People coming when they have some sicknesses, especially they don't really find a reason. It could be mental or physical, like autoimmune disease or hormonal problems or pains that are unidentified. And then it's very often a priority to revisit an emotional element of a difficult time, which could be pregnancy, delivery, loss, etc. So I think taking the time and the space to find the right way to process and be supported, especially during loss, is so important, both to help you go through that time, but also, as I was saying, as a gift to your future self, for your future mental, emotional, physical health. And I would even dare to say, if you have children, it's also a gift to your children, to the one that you might have already before the loss, or the one that you will have later, and that wouldn't have to carry so much of that heavy experience and stress. So my hope talking to you today is really to sort of acknowledge first the fact that loss of during pregnancy or of a baby and infant is such a strong experience with very strong feelings that are all valid. And I think it makes such a difference, and it's so important to find a way to just get in touch with those emotions, to get supported, And so that could be through body talk and other holistic therapies, or it could be through other ways. And I think it's great. That's why I really love those coffee morning that you plan for the whole month, because I think it's different for every person. You have to find the right combination that works for you at a certain time. And but whether it's during the loss or even years after, I think it makes such a difference to be able to get that support and that chance to just process those emotions. So I hope those talks, I mean, me today, Dani, and then the following weeks are going to give some ideas to women on how they can find the right way to be supported, if that happens to them, if that happened to them, or also if they have some friends or people around them that are going through it. And yeah, I'm really grateful again for that, because I think it's again such an important topic where we can do so much more. So we'll see if there are some questions, but Dani is going to also talk to you in a second, and I just wanted to share in the meantime just here my website. If you want to learn more about Body Talk, it's balanceblossom.com. There is also Sue Fan, who is a wonderful teacher and practitioner in Singapore, and she organizes some training classes. So if you want to go a bit further and maybe learn some body talk techniques for yourself, not necessarily to become a practitioner, but just also for personal use, that's her website, really is. And then don't hesitate to just contact me after if you don't feel like asking questions now. There is my email, my Facebook, etc. And Johanna has all that too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Léna. Yeah, I mean, you really talked about us, you know, how the body has a very clever way of just moving on and, you know, storing and protecting itself from all these emotions that are coming up. And this is often what happens with trauma. It's almost like the body says, okay, let's brush this under the carpet and move on to, you know, to function better and to, yeah. So we don't tend to often address the issues that we have. And I love that you have modalities that can bring that up in a safe way and in a safe space. And as you said, when you're ready to receive that treatment as well, right? So amazing. Thank you. Mummy's on the chat. Sorry, on the call rather. Feel free to put your messages in the chat, or if you have any comments or any questions for Léna at this point, this would be a great time to ask her how Body Talk could help you. Léna, if you wouldn't mind stopping your sharing, and I will share your slide, obviously, as well later on. If there are no questions, I think we're ready to move on to Dani. Super excited to have you on the call as well. Oh, sorry, there is a question now. Does Body Talk help with childhood trauma that affects pregnancy?
Yes,
question.
Yes,
Thank you.
Definitely. This is a topic that is also coming up quite often. I think anything that really is affecting us mentally, emotionally, or physically, and that we can change can be addressed with Body Talk. And so childhood trauma and experiences is coming up so often in sessions. And I think it's also when we get pregnant, there's all those emotions that are just coming up more. And as you were saying, Johanna, is just like, is it the right time? Well, often when there is something in our life that reminds us of that time, like we're going to be parents ourselves, indeed, it can come up. So yes, definitely a topic I work on.
This is why I really wanted to widen the topic a little bit and see how that approach can not just work for grief and loss, because pregnancy and childbirth is such a big event, and you wouldn't believe how much actually comes up in the delivery suite, you know, when the mom is going through this process, this intense life experience. Nothing is like it, like you would have never have imagined what might come up in that moment. So addressing it in pregnancy might be a really good thing to be better prepared for birth as well. We have another question on the chat, which is wondering what daily practices, in your opinion, can release the grief and emotional pain?
Okay, so this is a question that I'm not so good at answering here, because it's a little bit outside of the scope of Body Talk. There is, I mean, there are a few things that can be done, like tapping and things. And what I quite liked about a body talk session is there is always a question I ask the body in the end, which is there anything that the person can do in her daily life to support the work that we're doing there? So that might come up, but I have no idea what the answer will be, because it will be different for every person. But I would say for me, body talk will be more a way to just reset things and then help the person feel what's right for her. So either she will feel herself and start, I don't know, journaling, or maybe change jobs and organize those wonder things like Léna and Sylvia did. Yeah, it's a little bit outside of my scope. There are other modalities that can help, like with tapping, for example. But yeah, maybe Dani, you might be able to jump in and answer a little bit more. But that would be a little bit, yeah, outside of my scope. I'm not the best person to answer. Give you.
Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I think there is a lot, and I'll cover some of it when I kick into my little piece. But there are a couple of really key principles on releasing grief. The first one is, and I think what can tend to happen when we've got very low bandwidth because we've experienced such a massive shift in our lives and our projected trajectory of going into motherhood, and then boom, all of a sudden the gear changes on that. I'm speaking around particularly loss of pregnancy. Is what a lot of us tend to do is retract in and isolate for lots of different reasons. And yet we know psychologically and also energetically that what facilitates good healing is safe connection. And that's why I love this community that you're growing. You and Léna are growing, Johanna, and I think that's also one of the offerings in seeing a holistic practitioner like Léna or like myself, is that the importance of expressing what you're feeling. So it's not so much that the emotions that come with loss, which grief, and a lot of women move through a period of shame. There's usually an unfolding of emotional expression with loss. Anger comes into it. Then there's a little bit of a self-pity that comes into it. And you move through these phases of emotional processing when you've had loss. But if they're not expressed, that's when it can cause some issues within the body and also your ability to step back into life. So finding safe company for emotional expression and not judging what those emotions are that are moving through you, because that creates a severe disconnect also within yourself and your support network. And so it's about cultivating a system of emotional acceptance and allowing those emotions to be expressed. So that would be the first one. When I work with women, and it's not just women with baby loss. So I'll maybe I'll just go into what I'm saying and what I was going to say.
With you, but I think much of it might be addressed in Dani's talk as well.
I think it will, yeah. And if it's not, please, everyone, it's so lovely to see all the little names on the screen, but just please pop in the chat, because any questions that you have, and make the most of this time. So, well, thank you, Léna. Thanks. It was beautiful. I love body talk. I haven't studied it. I've interviewed people. I know Sufan well. And what you guys are going to hear when I explain Reiki is very, very similar expressions. So slightly different angle, slightly different approach, but essentially I think what we're talking about with holistic practices and also the energy arts is all of them in their own way work with the innate intelligence of the human system. So the premise with Reiki is that the humans, and I say system, not just body. So when I say system, I'm talking about the self-organizing system of the physiology, the mental body, the emotional body, our bioenergy complex, and also our spirit. So 5 layers of consciousness, all interrelated, all infused, and all reaching constantly for wellness. And so the body is innately intelligent, the system is innately intelligent. But of course, you know, if there's disconnect between these elements of the system, this is where a holistic practitioner like Léna or like myself can be useful, because as Léna was saying, the body knows what it needs and it speaks. And as I'm about to explain with the Sui Reiki, Reiki is an intelligent, life-wood, harmonizing life force. And that's actually what the word Reiki means. It's actually made up of two words, Rei meaning universal and Ki being Chi, being life force, universal life force. So when people, I've got about 100 people in my community that I have trained and attuned in the most traditional form of Reiki, which is a Sui Reiki. And all of them attest, including in my experience of having Reiki in my life, that it's far beyond a healing modality. So but Reiki itself brings an intelligence, it brings a harmony, and it heals, you know, and also it communicates with the Reiki practitioner and the receiver. So the Reiki flow itself moves and vibrates differently and peaks and ebbs and also moves to other parts of the receiver's body, regardless of where the healer's hands are. So this is really interesting. So Reiki is a relatively recently formulated energy art. So the original form of Reiki, there are lots of different forms of Reiki now because that's the way we adapt and we refract different forms of different modalities. But the traditional origin of the Reiki world is Sui Reiki, and it was formulated by a Japanese doctor. He was also a physician, he was also a healer, Sato Sui. But what's interesting is that it's based on, and around about, I'm going to get this wrong, there'll be Reiki people on this call that'll go, no, but I think it's sort of like around the 1950s that Reiki was formulated as a modality, but it is based on much older Taoist energy principles. And we know that within the use of what we call the symbols, the Reiki symbols, which are actually key codes to move different frequencies of healing energy as required into the receiver's system. So I call my offering intuitive healing, and I train the Sui Reiki within the context of intuitive healing. And the reason for that is what I observed is the more that I ran the Reiki and the busier I got with healing work, the sharper my psychic senses became. And I started to perceive different aspects of the issue and different underlying layers to whatever the client was coming to me with during the Reiki session. So I started to realize and really observe that there is a correlation between this Reiki, which is a high resonance, life wood organizing force, and our more subtle senses and subtle aspects of being. And so that's why I wrote a course called Intuitive Healing, which includes traditional Sui instruction as well as psychic development. So people come and see me for lots of different things because of this beautiful complex of the human system. So I work with a lot of people with cancer. I work with a lot of people with chronic illness. I work with people with depression, anxiety, neurodiversity. I work with a lot of people just on finding purpose and movement forward. It really can be anything that people come and see me for. And I find that within the Reiki session, it can be a one hit, and there's a physical healing that we've seen. We've seen amazing things on the healing bed, bones straighten, esophagus is open. We've seen, if the environment is right within the client and they're ready, it will happen. Some people check in with me once a month. Some people check in with me whenever they're in Singapore. And the beautiful aspect about, of course, Sui Reiki is there is a modality within a Sui Reiki where the practitioner does not need to share the same time and space as the receiver. So on Mondays and Thursdays, I'm in the healing room in person here in Singapore. On Wednesdays, shortly after this call, I do remote sessions with my international clients. And the energy is just as palpable. It can be felt through the system. The revelation is just as clear. whether I've actually physically got my hands on the client or whether I don't. And I find this fascinating because what we're really dealing with here with the energy arts is working within the connected field of consciousness, either within the human system, which is beyond time and space. So some typical sensations of Reiki will be, we know definitely heat and temperature changes. So very often people will come off my bed and they'll be looking for heat pads on my hands. I say, no heat pads, that's the Reiki. So it is an unnatural heat. It doesn't burn, but it is an unnatural heat. So you know it's just not my warm hands. You know, there is definitely an energy flow that's moving through the hands. I like to touch, but I always ask if some people don't like touch. But I think there is a somatic element to Reiki, which is very calming, which allows the receiver to feel seen and to feel acknowledged. You know, just with touch alone, it's super powerful. Other sensations with Reiki is very vibratory. So people will, I call it the fizzies, but people will have sensations of energy moving in waves around them. Very, very beautiful. We know that Reiki alters the brainwave patterning very readily. And generally, if you're sticking with a traditional Reiki treatment, you start at the crown around the head and you can feel the Reiki interact with the mental field of the receiver, and very, very quickly you can sense the whole body of the receiver settle and calm. Now, part of that is facilitated by the Reiki switching out brainwave patterning into a longer and slower rhythm. And that's why often when you read about Reiki, it's referred to as a facilitated meditation. So the brainwave patterning changes, which are measured, which are scientifically measured. Thank goodness there is so much more scientific examination of the energy arts now. We're getting some really beautiful research around, and we've got the mechanisms to measure now heart field resonance, brainwave patterning in much clearer ways, so we can see the effect of Reiki. It's called a facilitated meditation because the shifts in brainwave patterning that happen as the Reiki starts to flow are identical to someone moving into deep states of meditation. And very often what will happen is if my client is tired, they'll just get knocked out, like they've been hit with a tranquilizer dart. And I tell them not to fight that, you know, because a Reiki sleep is the most replenishing thing that you can have. But mostly my clients will go into a theta state. Now, a theta brainwave state, I describe it to my clients as being in the skimmy in between, right? So it's where you're aware, you know you're awake and you're conscious, you are deeply relaxed. And you are also internally, if you're visually oriented or sensitive to energy, you will also have perceptions internally of colour, energy, waves, and patterns. And what's beautiful about that is all of those perceived colours and sensations have correspondences to different aspects of healing. And it's in the theta brainwave state that the body's natural healing mechanisms kick in terms of cellular regeneration, immune function boosting, and particularly in relation to what we're talking about today, hormonal and nervous system regulation. So, oh my God, I love it. And I can talk about it all day, but I want to move into what are the types of examples of sessions and work that I've done with women through the pregnancy journey. So I work a lot with women on conscious conception. And so, but very often women will come to me when they've done everything that the medical realm can assist them with. So, you know, they've tried all of the diets, they've tried natural conception, they've gone through rounds of IVF, and then they arrive at the energy healer's door. And I've got, I sort of spruik about this, but I've got this lovely gallery of double red photographs of women sending me their double red lines telling me they're pregnant. And I keep it in a gallery because Reiki has this very beautiful, and it combined with the intuitive coaching, has this very beautiful way of illuminating what needs to open up in the sacral and the heart of the woman to prepare herself for the archetypal initiation of motherhood. So you were talking before, Johanna, about how it's so huge, this movement into motherhood, and it starts as that longing, and sometimes a cellular longing, and then it blooms into a focus. And that is the movement in a woman's natural cycle. Not all women go through it, which is also totally fine, but being initiated into what we call in the spiritual arts, the archetype of the mother. Now, I'm raising this because it's super important, because I also feel, and in the work that I've done with women who've experienced a loss in a pregnancy, that this is also can be for many women part of that initiation. Because to move into the archetype of the mother, you move into an incredible new paradigm of unconditionality with your love, with your body, with yourself, with your life, and your heart and your system calibrates to be able to stream the most powerful force in the material world, which is a mother's love. Can you hear me? I'm getting...
Absolutely.
You can still hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
And I love that. And Dani, I will definitely share that we have one WhatsApp group that is focused on conception and fertility. And I think these moms will be loving to hear what you're talking about here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the process of, I'd love to join. Thank you, Johanna. And the process of conscious conception is very sacred and very beautiful, you know, but moving on from conception, I work with women whose bodies are calibrating to pregnancy. So the morning sickness, the aches, the pains, the feeling as well that you are no longer in control of your system, because a very powerful program of growing and incarnating another human being boots up. And also it affects your identity within your life as well. You know, I'm sure all women who have been through pregnancy, I've got 2 huge teenage children now, but you almost feel like you can become public property. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone feels they can touch your belly. Everyone tells you that you should be doing this and should be doing that. And it requires a recalibration of your sense of self, which I think is enabled through this initiation into motherhood, and very important when you're dealing with the loss of a baby as well, because everyone has an opinion. And being able to stand in your truth and detect what feels right for you and what doesn't, what resonates, what doesn't, and to draw very gentle but very clear boundaries on what you're allowing into your system and what you're not is key when you're dealing with grief. I'm sure all very well-meaning, but the opinions during pregnancy and loss are just, it's well-meaning, but it's not very sensitive, I find. I also I work with women who are preparing for birth, very, very beautiful. And of course, I work with women who are processing loss and particularly as well at all stages of that loss. So I have women come in who've just experienced a loss, you know, and their body still may be very much in that release mode. Where Reiki is excellent for that is in the hormonal regulation. It's a huge judder shock, chemically, hormonally, and physically for a system. It's like a big gear change. Mentally and emotionally, of course, but also in the system. And Reiki is very, very good for aiding the body's reach for hormonal regulation again. Sometimes I will have women who come in who've experienced a loss. They've worked it through psychologically, so they're able to mentally hold it peacefully, or at least with some acceptance that it's part of their journey, but they're unable energetically and emotionally to move back into possibly trying again on conception, or they somehow feel still a kind of a disconnect with their body. So even though psychologically they've worked it through, and women's intuition is just so, you know, if we could only learn to just trust it more, but they do feel, I don't like using the word block. I don't, in the way that I teach Reiki and the healing arts. So I know it's a very common term, and it's one that's used in body talk, and I think we're all talking about semantics here. But if a woman feels that there's a dense energy, a low energy, or a feeling of disconnect with her body, it's her system working perfectly well to tell her that she needs to move her awareness to different aspects to find alignment. So I think the danger with using words like blocked is that something's wrong.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with your system. It's communicating with you. And that's where a really good energy healer will be able to create a feedback loop to you of what your body and your system is wanting your awareness on. Our awareness heals. Another aspect that I find with women who come in who are experiencing the loss of a child is a safe place for emotional expression. So in my observation, depending on what the family structure and the culture and the societal structure that the woman is dwelling in her life, many women feel this pressure to just hold their shit together when they're interacting with the community, even with their family, and possibly as well if they've got other children and with a partner who is also in their own way processing the loss. Yet inside, they're dying. And they don't have safe containers where they can have a really good emotional release. And I find that this is so important for women. And when they come in, what Reiki does facilitate is that emotional release. And what's interesting too is that women will come and they'll walk in the door of my healing room, and before I got my hands on them, they'll be crying. And this is a very common conversation. They'll sit down, I've got a box of tissues, then they go, I don't even know you. We haven't even started yet. Why am I crying? And I said, because you are in a healing space. And the most important and prevalent healing move for you right now is to move this emotional energy through your system. And the most common way that that's going to happen is through emotional release. This is good for you. And so that's another. And with grief and with loss, it comes in waves. And I'm sure everyone on this call who's experienced some form of bereavement knows that. So you can be going fine and you can actually go, oh, the sun's come out again in my psyche. And then all of a sudden, something will remind you. It can be a smell. You can find that little pair of socks that you bought and you forgot that you bought them and they're in the drawer, and then bam, it just feels like you've hit a wall. Now, what's really important to understand here, and which is what Reiki facilitates as well, is you're not going backwards. So I get this. I get women coming going, I thought I processed it and I've just hit this wall and I can't operate. No. Grief moves like our whole system moves in ebbs and flows, and it will come and it will rise, and that emotional expression is a form of natural healing. There is nothing wrong. This is the biggest message I can give women who are experiencing a loss. There is nothing wrong. And I'm just watching time because I know I bang on. Oh my goodness, 8 minutes. Okay. Another thing which is really quite prevalent in my sessions with women who are dealing with either a sort of a natural loss or an intentional termination is, again, like Léna was talking about, they may have made the choice psychologically, they're feeling really good, but they are holding underneath conscious thought some shame, some guilt, and some fear. Now, fear, shame, and guilt have a very dense psychic weight. And as an energy practitioner, I almost always feel them in the lower energy centers of a woman's body, in the sacral. Mm-hmm. And because they are distortions of energy, fear, shame, and guilt are the emotional byproducts of us being separated from ourselves and judging ourselves. Now, the reasons why we do that are manifold. It can be what we've heard, how we've been raised. It can be our natural inclination to go to guilt or whatever. However, what I do find is when fear and shame and guilt are detectable within the sacral, within the energy body of a woman, it can really affect their fertility and also their ability to step back into the process of moving into motherhood. And Reiki is wonderful at moving that out. And so, you know, very often I have women, this is a common example of women who it may be many months after they've experienced the loss. However, for no apparent medical reason, their body hasn't kicked in their mensa again. Mm-hmm. Something that's stopping their body from opening up to the possibility of another conception. It's usually fear, shame, or guilt. And I've had extraordinary experiences on the bed where I've perceived that the Reiki surges because it's an unnatural state, spontaneously surges into the sacral. And on many occasions, I've had women, their bleed spontaneously start on the healing bed. As soon as that distorted energy is moved out, bam, out on it goes, which is also another beautiful form of a cellular release of these heavy, densely weighted emotions. So that's another pretty common experience. We talked a little bit about connection. So I think a lot of women, for whatever reason within their social construct, they tend to retreat, and coming in and seeing a healer that you trust in a beautiful space where you feel safe, often it's just that conversation that can be the most healing thing. So there's so much more I could talk about with Reiki, but anyway, as you can see, I absolutely love it. It's the life-changing modality for me and for my clients. I wanted to go into, you know, Hannah, you mentioned that that many holistic practitioners, we have lots of different tools in our medicine bag, and I do too. So while I work as a psychic and a Reiki master, I'm also trained in different shamanic modalities, and I'm a total Carl Jung junkie as well from depth psychology. And so these are the frameworks that I pull out as well when I'm working with women to deal with loss. And I wanted to give some perspectives that have arrived in sessions when I've been working with women in processing their grief and bereavement. And they largely come from the shamanic frameworks. Okay, so very often on the fertility journey of a woman, and she'll come in and there's no signs on the horizon, and she's done her gazillionth round of IVF, and she's despondent and she's starting to feel it's not going to happen. And with some women it doesn't happen, but very often I can perceive psychically when I'm working with that woman and I'm running the Reiki, the presence of the baby. Mm-hmm. Now, I see it in my mind's eye like a little blue light or a little pink light, and it's riding very, very close to the woman. And if I can move into that clearly, I'm able to tell them when to expect a conception, and it's right. So that's my gallery. That's why they send me their double lines. Now, first of all, that's amazing and gorgeous. Secondly, what it's telling us is that there is already an energetic and spiritual interaction between the child and the mother prior to the conception. There's an intelligence at play, and there's a bonding at play before the conception. And so this is very much shared in nearly every shamanic framework that I've studied in. And that is that the child, or their soul, if you like, chooses the mother through which it wants to incarnate in this life as it is. So how do we relate that to the loss of a child? And because if there is an intelligence at play, and if there is a spirit that's choosing you to move through, yet it doesn't end up in a complete pregnancy and holding a baby in your arms, what's that about?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be different for everyone, but there are a couple that I've written down here that I want to share with you with 1 minute to go. What I've seen and what I've perceived, and they've been very useful perspectives for women to work with, to release that tight grip of loss and be able to step back into life and into flow. sometimes what I've seen, and it sounds like a funny image, but psychically what I've seen is a picture of the being, of the baby, that's moved through a conception and then moved out again without coming to fruition as a full incarnation, flicking through a catalogue like this, or kind of swiping left, you know, like on a dating app. And the intuition that I got from that is that the children are also involved in selecting the genetic combination of the form they want to take in this world. And if that genetic combination isn't quite aligned with how they want to roll in this life as a human being, they will swipe left. So, which I think is really interesting. And then there will be a miscarriage. Okay, so that's one thing that has come up sometimes, and very, very useful for the mothers to process, that it's not an event that's happening to them. It's a phenomenon of two intelligences that are in a contract to create life and have new life experience. So that sounds really deep, but it's a thing. The other thing that I've seen is particularly with women who it's their first time pregnancy, and I have to concur with Léna that it's way more common than perhaps what women understand it to be. And because you can feel very isolated and very alone when you experience a loss like that, a miscarriage, you feel like you've done something wrong. But it's very, very common. It's a natural process of the body where something's not aligned, the systems aren't working for whatever reason, and the environment within isn't right, and the system will not complete the pregnancy. But what I do see, though, is that especially for first-time mothers, there seems to be, as uncomfortable and as raw as it is, an experience of partial pregnancy to open the heart and open the system of the woman to be able to fully accommodate moving into motherhood and bringing a child into the world and all of what that contains. And so I sense sometimes with my clients that even though this little comet has sort of zipped through the galaxy of their womb and then back out into the universe, that this was also an intelligent agreement that was made, that there's purpose to booting up the system for a little while and then it coming down. There's an opening which occurs, which very often always can be super uncomfortable and emotional. But there's so many more I can talk about, and I know we're on time. But one other thing from the shamanic framework that I do recommend a lot with my clients which goes into what other things can you be doing outside of an energy session. I agree with Léna that, trauma, if you want to call it that, or huge emotional gear changes are held in the cells. And so after a session, when we do the intuitive coaching and I express what came through for them, and they share with me what they got with the energy, we record all of this. So you've got a record of it. I will suggest what I call some spirit homework. So depending on what's needed, but it always does involve some form of somatic work, whether that be emotional freedom technique. I also teach that. I love breath work because it's very, very gentle. It eases open. It enables, breath work enables emotional release, but in a very super gentle way. And also what it does do is it creates some space in the psyche so you can process things and maybe adopt different perspectives, which allows it to move through. And the other thing that seems to be prevalent, depending on what medical system you're in with the loss of a baby, is that I often, women come to me and they haven't felt that they've really honoured the baby and honoured the experience. And so it can be very medical, it can be very clinical. There's immediate movement to getting your body back into stasis. That can be quite difficult with DNCs and things like that. You're dealing with a partner, you're possibly dealing with children, you're dealing with mothers and mothers-in-laws that are also disappointed and all that sort of stuff. And then you come out of the malaise of all of that and you still are feeling this connection with this beautiful little spirit. And so from my shamanic training, one thing that I do suggest with women, and I help them do it, is ritual. To move into a private, personal, it can be witnessed with people that you're safe with, it can be with your partner, and there are beautiful rituals from many different world traditions that honour the passing of a little one that's moved through the womb and gone back out into the cosmos. And this is hugely healing because it allows the mother to acknowledge the experience in a sacred way. It allows, so no denial. It allows the mother to hold the experience within the container of her heart and make it sacred, and that heals. And very often, shortly after those rituals that I work with mums, another conception comes through when they're ready.
Yeah, I love that. Because that's what this is all about too, is having this positive outlook and the moving on as well, and the acknowledging, naming them and giving them a meaning as well. As you say, you know, they have a place, there's a reason for why they were with you, even if it was a limited amount of time. And I think a really beautiful way to look at it as well.
Yes.
So amazing. Do we have any questions on the call? Yes, we have gone a little bit over time, but that shouldn't keep us from asking your questions. I'll give you a moment to reply.
No, and while people are maybe typing in, I want to add to what you just said, Dani. Actually, I remember I had it in my notes, I never got it, but it's such important to have a way and to find a way to honor the experience and that time that has been spent together. And actually, when I was talking about those recommendations that sometimes come at the end of the session, that's one that is coming up very regularly. It's just find your own ritual or your own way to actually honor that experience and honor the baby, honor the time together, however short it was. And I think it's such a beautiful way to transform.
Yeah, you're in a dance with this little spirit, and I think that acknowledgement is hugely healing. Yeah, that's beautiful. It really depends on what medical system you're in as well. Like I'm Australian, I've lived in Singapore for 10 years, but in some of the Australian birthing suites and hospitals, they're really on top of this stuff. So, and it's beautiful what they do. And they also connect the community in as well. And, you know, a client of mine recently has also experienced a loss. And there was a group in Australia, and there's a group of women that support the birthing suite that sew from wedding gowns these beautiful little fabric, you know, sort of burial cloths, really, for the baby, and it's so beautifully done. But I haven't heard those kind of stories here in the Singapore system.
Dani, we do have angel gowns.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, and we do have doulas, obviously, who support birth and who help create memories around that stillbirth or miscarriage or termination. But the awareness isn't there. So not very often that we get called to support this. There's also a doula, if I remember correctly, who does rebirthing ceremonies here as well. So there is some of that here. And I love that you just told us that, because I'd be more than happy to send people your way for these rituals, because I think it's so, so important to have that done. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that in the future, people will listen to this or watch this video and find a lot of resources. And I love what you shared, and you have so many different talents and modalities surrounding what we discussed, the Reiki and the body talk. So I'm very, very grateful for you having spent your morning with us. And I'll be sharing your details, and then hopefully people will reach out to you and find some hope and comfort and help in your modalities as well.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, it's a pleasure, and it's really nice to connect with Léna as well. And I'm very happy to be here because, as you both expressed earlier, this needs discussion, and there needs to be safe containers of resources and sharing for women around this, rather than suffering in silence. And so I'm very happy to be here. I think it's fantastic. I will share with you my link as well to my podcast, The Modern Crone. In the second season, I call it The Rise of the Energy Arts, and I interview 6 different energy healers, including Sufen from BODYTALK. If I knew you then, Léna, I would have interviewed you. And there's some lovely insights in there about the different modalities of the energy arts and how they can help with your healing. So I'll send you that link as well.
Is that okay to be posted under the Facebook video as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I would love to share that too. That's amazing. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the moms who took time off their busy mornings to listen in. And we'll see you again next week when we'll talk about more physical healing modalities as well. Thank you, Léna, and thank you, Dani, for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.